Welcome to Digital Mental Health Musings, a podcast series from the eMental Health in Practice initiative, providing health practitioners with the latest news and developments in digital mental health services and resources. MPRAC acknowledges the Turrbal and Yagara people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we bring you this conversation. We acknowledge elders past and present and honour their continuing connection to land, culture and community, and that it's these connections that are intertwined in Indigenous mental health and social and emotional well-being. We acknowledge the strength and resilience of all First Nations people and communities since colonisation of their unceded lands. Hello and welcome back to Digital Mental Health Musings. I'm your host, Dr. Tanya McMahon. Thank you for tuning in. I'm delighted you're here. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to be joined by social worker Diane Cass for our On the Ground mini-series, delving into the real-world ways in which health professionals are using digital mental health with their clients. Diane started her career in England as a lawyer before making the move to Australia in 2002, which also inspired a career change. She has a Master of Social Work, a Master of Mental Health Practice, and has taught at universities across Australia. Diane is also currently a doctoral candidate with Charles Stuart University. Through her research, she hopes to improve the mental health of families struggling with chronic and life-limiting illness after her own diagnosis with mitochondrial disease. So, on to the episode. Enjoy. Diane, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you join us today.
Thank you. It's an absolute delight to be here, and I'm really privileged to be able to come here online.
So, Diane, I mentioned just now about your current research. Can you tell us a little more about what you're investigating and the significance it has to you and your own lived experience?
So in 2019, myself and my 3 sons were diagnosed with a very rare form of mitochondrial disease. It's so rare, it doesn't actually have a name. It's just got a sequence of numbers. We didn't really know how to unpack this because it was so huge. So I did some research on seeing if I could find a group or some supports for multiple members of families who are dealing with a life-limiting illness, and I found nothing. So I thought, well, we're not the only family. So I decided to look at doing my own research, what that would look like, the best way of going about it, and found that studying a doctorate was probably going to be the best way of getting the information, the accurate information, and disseminating it well. So that's what I did. So I want to see what is going to work for people who have more than one person in their life, in their family, who are diagnosed with a life-limiting and or chronic illness, because chronic illness can be equally as debilitating. The reason is it's different. When I looked at joining a group or finding some supports for multiple family members, all the information I found was for if a loved one is dying, if you're dying, if you've got a diagnosis, if your child has a diagnosis. I just couldn't find anything for if you have a diagnosis and all your children have a diagnosis. And it is different. There are differences. At one point, I've had 3 loved ones in hospital at the same time. Who do I go and sit with? There's all this guilt because you can only be with one person at a time, one child, and they were all children at the time. What do you do in that situation? It's different than if you've only got one person who is unwell. Everybody can wrap around that one person. Whereas when it's multiple people, you have such complex grief because you're grieving your own future that you anticipated would happen, but you're also grieving the loss of your children's futures that are not going to happen. So it's very, very different. And that's what I want to capture. That's what I want to find. how we can do it better, how we can, I'd really ideally like to have doctors provide families at the point of diagnosis with some supports and resources. And I would like to create some resources for services so that if someone goes to them, for example, Lifeline, then they'll be able to point them in the right direction or provide resources to them. So that's my ideal role.
Wow, that's incredible. So it's really acknowledging that it's not just people wrapping around this one person experiencing a life-limiting illness and providing that support for them. It's everyone in the in this family environment having to play multiple roles, givers and receivers of care. That's really incredible, and I imagine that really would have and would be informing your own work then with your clients and the people that you work with. Now, you practice as a social worker, as we mentioned before. Can you tell us about the kind of work that you've engaged in, the kind of clients you would typically work with, and what that's looked like?
Yeah, so I work with adults. I have had a few children, but generally I try and stay with adults. It's more in my wheelhouse. I did some training in PTSD, so I also work with Open Arms, who are the branch of Department of Veterans Affairs who deal with veterans and mental health issues. I also, in private practice, see clients billed either privately or through Medicare.
And so what was the turning point for you in adopting digital mental health tools and products into your workflow? So obviously talking about, online, say, treatments or information sources or places of online peer connection, those kind of digital mental health tools. What was that turning point for you? When did you start looking at those as something of interest to your work?
I think working in the universities was a really good foundation for me, because we had a lot of younger people and they were very interested in going home and doing online things in the evenings. So I did have a foundation there. But I think, as with many people, probably COVID was the main turning point for completely switching over, if you like, to the online platforms and digital mental health. In addition to having that online platform to see clients and engage with them at meetings or appointments, I also started to work more with clients in terms of giving them other things that they could utilize throughout the week or fortnight or however often I would see them. So some of the main ones that I used were Black Dog, which is a fantastic website. It's a really nice interface. It's easy to read, it's easy to follow, and they have personal stories on there from people who have contacted them and provided their histories. And clients like that. They tend to engage well. We all like that. We all like to learn that we're not the only person dealing with this, and it's okay for me to say you're not the only person dealing with this, but when they actually hear stories of other people and how they've overcome certain situations, I think it's incredibly powerful. So that's Black Dog. I really like Black Dog. I really like Beyond Blue as well, for the same reason. Clients have always reported that it was easy to read. There's not too much information. There's a lot of fact there. So in terms of like the fact sheets that they provide, it's not just text heavy. It's easy for the client to just grab a sheet, have a look at it online or whatever, however they use that. And then just, it might have dot points. It's just easier for them to engage, have a quick look at that and take something away. Whereas when something is just all writing, clients don't really want to engage with that. It's too hard, it's too difficult. None of us want to do that, especially if we're working at the end of a long day. We get tired. The better the interface, the website, the easier it is for clients to manage. I think Reach Out is also a really good resource because they have lists of apps. So particularly with I found with younger clients, they will see what apps are available, and it also details whether they're free, if there's a cost, because a lot of the apps are free and they can engage quite well. They've got it on their phone. I'm a bit older and I wear glasses, so for me it's not ideal always to have an app because it's harder for me to see. But I know, all of these things you have to take into account when you have a client and what's going to work for them. And if you don't know, ask.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you were saying about the shift with COVID, because that's my own experience as a clinician too, that these tools were there beforehand. I mean, Zoom was there, but all the digital mental health tools as well were there beforehand, but it was this kind of forced transition to online work where we're working online and sending resources online that made me as well look online for things to support my clients, because I couldn't give them a worksheet anymore. I couldn't photocopy out of a textbook anymore.
Yes.
Just hand one of my handouts. And so really, I think it sounds like for you as well opened up your work to digital resources and allowed us to go looking for and find the Black Dogs and the Beyond Blues, those really helpful information sources to provide to clients as part of the work we're doing with them. And it sounds like the same, not just an information providing role. The same happened with creating spaces for peer connection. It sounds like with your work, that people really wanting to not feel alone in what they're experiencing. And I totally agree. You can say, oh, well, you're not alone. There's probably X amount of people out there, but it's nothing like hearing an actual story, even maybe chatting to someone who's gone through something similar, because obviously there's a lot of people might be familiar with the Beyond Blue online forums for different mental health and other situational issues. And it's so powerful to be in contact with other people going through the same. I imagine that your own experience with your mitochondrial disease, that would have really resonated with you, having being able to find spaces online for people to connect with others going through the same thing.
Absolutely, yes, definitely. And I think it also helped me to understand the importance of a self-care plan, and that these things go in a self-care plan. So when I would create a plan for clients or with clients, instead of going from family, friends, straight to calling an ambulance, there would be all these different resources in between. So if they didn't have a family member they could contact, then the next step will be perhaps going online and seeing what they could find there. I have found the feedback has been incredibly positive from my clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was kind of wondering that. Are there any examples that you can speak to about benefits that you've seen in having these additional resources there as part of your work?
There's lots actually, but a couple come to mind. One was a young girl. Having said I don't generally work with children, but I have had a few, and she found a really good app through the Reach Out website, and she was so excited. She came back. I was seeing her weekly for a while. She was quite unwell, and then generally it was fortnightly. And she was in quite a low place, and this app just helped her because she had a phone with her all the time. So whenever she was feeling overwhelmed or a bit like she wasn't going to manage, she would simply go on her phone, have a play with the app, and I don't remember the name of the app, unfortunately, but there were quite a few on there. And because it was free, she could use it as often as she wanted, and it was great. So that was a really good resource for her, and it helped with her equilibrium throughout the day when she wasn't able to discuss it with anybody. The other one that really comes to mind was a man who was, I'm going to say early 40s, and he'd had a suicide in his family of a very close loved one, and he had quite complex grief as a result of that. It was very, very difficult for him to process it. One site I haven't mentioned, and I think they've changed their name, it's just called Grief now, but it was the Grief and Bereavement Association, I believe. And again, very, very useful resources, very helpful. We talked about different types of grief, and we talked about, I provided him with the connection and links of how to get to the fact sheets. And he read something from the Rosemary, I think it's called the Rosemary branch. I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly, but it's their magazine. And there was an article in there, and it just resonated with him so much so that he talked about it for 6 months afterwards.
Wow.
And he was like a new person. Yeah. And it was just this one article, it just connected. And it's that aha moment sometimes, because I don't have all the answers. None of us have all the answers, and we need these resources as a wraparound, as part of our toolbox. And I think that they're incredibly valuable as part of our toolbox if we use them as such. So yeah, that's a couple of examples I can think of, but I'm sure there are dozens more.
And that's a really lovely way of putting it. We don't have all the answers as clinicians, and obviously we can't, and it's really enhancing and augmenting the work that we do to be able to draw on this huge sort of repository almost out there of different ways to support our clients, whether that's through information or peer connection and other people's stories, or an app that supports them. And I really love how you've described there about that it's just finding the right thing. There's so many options out there. There's not going to be a perfect app that fits everyone. It's finding the right one for that particular client. You said, particularly with that younger client, an app was just perfect for her because it was in her pocket all the time. She used it all the time. It was just that little bit of support she needed. And interestingly, you mentioned older adults before, and we might think, oh, maybe it's a bit more difficult to use technology for older adults. Maybe they're not as suitable. But there's also great research showing that with, say, online treatment courses, there's ones out there such as like MindSpot, This Way Up, Mental Health Online, which are full courses of treatment online for different depression, anxiety, different issues. Older adults have been shown to have great completion rates because they really have strong commitment when it comes to, committing to doing something and seeing it through. And often there's a lot less dropout for older adults in those particular programs. And there could be a whole lot of factors. Maybe it's easier to read on a big computer rather than a small screen. Maybe it's a style that works for them. But I think that the point here is it's really about finding, there's so many options, and it's being able to pick the right thing from that library of options to help provide that extra support, the little gaps in between where we can't be there all the time, and give them everything. So it sounds like you found really fantastic ways to do that in your work. Has it introduced any surprising challenges? Have there been challenges in introducing these kinds of tools where you've been drawing on your existing skills in adapting to using it?
Actually, I've been thinking about this question, and I've been very lucky. I haven't had many challenges. I think the only thing is technology. It can fail. I've had a few power cuts, not many, but a few, where then I've had to use a telephone and have a telephone appointment instead of an online appointment, which is never as good. It's so much better to be able to see the person rather than just hear them. But it still worked, and at least they've had that connection, and you've been able to touch base, answer questions maybe, and discuss how to move forward and so on. So I've been very lucky. I haven't really found any major challenges, which is great, I think. And I think as long as you've got that ability to use basic computer skills, it's not going to be too bad. Actually, I've just remembered a situation where I was presenting a case note seminar to a group of new people in an organisation. So it was part of the orientation. And I had no sound of them, so I couldn't hear them, but they could hear me, but they couldn't see my PowerPoint. So I just talked and we made it work.
And I think that's a really good point, just, you know, with technology as a whole, is that we make it work, and not because we know technology particularly well necessarily, or we're masters at overcoming those, but I think we as clinicians, we draw on our flexibility and adaptability, because there's been plenty of times pre-digital work where things haven't worked either. Like, here, I'm going to hand you this worksheet. Oh, I've run out, or I can't find it, or you've brought up this other issue that came up and you've just thrown my whole agenda out the window.
Yeah.
And that's got nothing to do with technology. And we find ways to make it work. And I think that's a really helpful thing for clinicians to reflect on when we think about introducing new things, new tools into our work, is we will make it work. We'll make it work the way we always do. So, you know, I really love hearing how you're you know, making this work in your work with clients. As we kind of come to a close, would you have any just general tips or advice to clinicians who are maybe completely new to digital tools, who are, you know, oh, I don't really know what's out there, or I haven't used anything, I'm sticking with what I know. Anyone who's completely new, any tips or advice from your experiences?
Yes, I think one of the main things that has worked for me, it's not going to work for everybody, is to have a play. Just play around. You're not going to break it. Just have a play with stuff. And I genuinely think it just makes life easier. Anyone who has young people in their lives will know that they have these opinions about us older people. When I got my first iPhone, all three of my sons were like, "Why did you get an iPhone? You won't be able to use that." Well, no, I can't use it. I couldn't use it until I got it, and then I had to play with it, and now I can use it. So it's just like that. It's just like anything. We don't know how anything works until we are taught how it works, or we learn how it works. So I genuinely believe that that's how I managed to bumble through with all of these things. And also, I have always taken notes. I used to have a much better memory. The disease that I have affects my memory, but even though my memory was pretty good, I would always take notes. Just like when you start a new job, you take notes of the login, you know, how to open the office in the morning, or whatever it might be. And taking notes isn't necessarily pen and paper. It could be on your phone, it could be on your iPad, whatever. You know, however it works for you. I think having something to refer back to, so if something happens and you think, oh, why is this happening again? It happened before and I can't remember how I fixed it. If you've got the notes, you can just go to it and, right, okay. And it does make it more relaxing to use the technology. And you're not alone. At the end of the day, we're all in this together, and you're very much not alone. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, fantastic advice. Yeah, have a play around with the tools. I like what you say. You're not going to break them. And in fact, that's how a lot of people can come across the ones that become their go-tos, is because they're having a play, they're having a sift through, or, you know, logging into different, you know, apps or programs or just information sites, seeing what's there, and then coming across stuff and going, oh wow, this is so easy to understand. This is fabulous. this becomes my go-to now. And the notes I like as well, actually, because sometimes you don't remember, like, did that one have a login, or, where did I have to, what drop-down box was, what menu is that thing that I found really helpful? Where was that? I think that's really, really great advice. And yes, we are all in this together. We're all kind of making this up as we go with figuring out how to do this blended care thing. There's so many different ways it can look. And we've really appreciated having you on and sharing your experiences, Diane. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this conversation, please remember to search for Digital Mental Health Musings on your favourite podcast platform and subscribe to catch new episodes. And to find out more about digital mental health or to access resources and digital mental health education, head to emprac.org.au.